In this problem, you need to apply the zero factor property to solve. And the zero factor property says that when you have two things multiplied together, for instance, A times B, then you either have A equal to 0 or B equal to 0. So let me write that down. So A times B equals 0 means A equals 0 or B equals 0. Okay, in this problem here, you do not have something equal to 0. But if we subtract 15 from both sides, then on the right you have 0. And then on the left you have 20t squared minus 13, I didn't give enough room here, minus 13t minus 15 equals 0. Alright, so we've got it equal to 0, but we still can't apply the zero factor property to solve because we don't have things multiplied together. Instead of A times B equals 0, we have A plus B plus C equals 0, or 20t squared minus 13t minus 15 equals 0. So that means we need to factor this problem before we can solve it. So let's factor 20t squared minus 13t minus 15. Okay, when you factor, you ask yourself a series of questions. First of all, you ask yourself, first of all, are there greatest common factors in this? And no, you cannot pull out a t, you cannot pull out a 5. 20t squared, 13t, and 15 do not share a common factor. Then you ask yourself, is it two terms? If it is, consider factoring using difference of squares, but it isn't, so we're not going to worry about that. Next you ask, is it three terms? And yes, one term is 20t squared, one term is negative 13t, and one term is negative 15. Okay, if it's three terms, then you have to ask, is the coefficient of the squared term equal to 1? In other words, here's the squared term and here's the coefficient. The coefficient does not equal 1, the coefficient equals 20. So, no. If it was 1, you would use reverse FOIL to factor, and you need to know how to do all these things. But is coefficient not equal to 1? And that answer is yes, because the coefficient is 20, and in that case you use grouping. And then the fourth question you would ask, if you haven't answered your question yet, is, are there four terms? And if there are four terms, you would try grouping. So you need to know all of this for factoring. And really, you should have learned this already in the previous section. Okay, here's how you do grouping. You need to multiply the first number by the last number. So we're going to multiply 20 times negative 15. We're going to draw a little chart. We need two numbers that multiply to 20 times negative 15, and that's going to be 20 times negative 15 is negative 300. I'll write that up there. They have to multiply to negative 300 and add to the middle term, which is negative 13. Okay, so we could start with 20 and negative 15 And we would want the largest number to be negative and the smallest number to be positive, so that when you add them together you get a negative number. But negative 20 plus 15 equals 5, not 13. So let's try negative 30 and 10, because 300 is negative 30 and 10. That gives you negative 20, so that's not going to work. But we're closer, so let's try negative 25 and 12. And negative 25 times 12 equals negative 300, and when you add them you get negative 13, which is what you're looking for. Okay, so now what we do is we rewrite the 20t squared, leave some space, and rewrite the last term, which is negative 15, see? But for the middle term, we're going to break it up, and if we have a negative and a positive, we're going to do the negative first. So negative 25t plus 12t. Now if you add these together, you get negative 13t. So this is called an equivalent expression to this expression. Okay, let me get rid of these extra marks so that it doesn't clutter up everything. Alright, so now once we have the middle term broken out like this, this sets us up to be able to group. You draw parentheses around the first two terms and a parentheses around the last two terms. In the first two terms, we pull out the common factor. The common factor is 5t. 5t goes into both of these. So your first term is, first you write your 5t, and then parentheses, 20 divided by 5 is 4, t squared divided by t is t, and then minus, and then 25 divided by t is 5, and the t's cancel. So our first term, 5t times 4t minus 5, and then the last parentheses, we have a 3 in common, so we're going to pull out a 3, and that leaves us with 4t minus 5. And because this and this, the first parentheses and the last parentheses, are the same, we can pull them out like this, and what we're left with is 5t plus 3. So we have factored this expression here, and now let's remember it's the same as this. So we're going to set this equal to 0. And remember our zero factor property that says, whoops, if we have two numbers multiplied together, or two things multiplied together, and they equal 0, then that means that the first one equals 0, or the second one equals 0, or the third one, if you have a third one. We only have 2 here. So now we can solve each of these. I'll break it up every step. We can solve each of these equations. First we add 5 to both sides, and we get 4t equals 5, and then we divide both sides by 4, and we get t equals 5/4. And then over here we subtract 3 from both sides, and we get 5t equals -3, and then divide by 5, and we get t equals -3/5. So your solution is going to be 5/4 and -3/5.